Hey everybody, this is Uncle Matt's D&D Neighborhood, and today we're going to be talking with two of the Silver Bulette guys, and so that's Ian McGarty and Rocky Gardner. So Ian, say hi to everybody. Ian, say hi to everybody.
How's it going?
You know what? We're skip over Ian. Rocky, say hi to everybody.
Hi everybody. How's it going tonight?
Now I've got an interesting thing for you guys that I ran across just talking on the net with some people yesterday. Somebody that I was talking to said that he got his first introduction to sort of the OSR from one of y'all's modules, and so I thought that was pretty cool, and I thought I'd share that with you, that you've been the intro for people now. We've got Douglas in the chat. Hey, Douglas. We'll probably pick up more of the regular folks. There's Alberta. We'll pick up more of the regular folks as we go along, probably. So Ian and Rocky are people that I hang out with at conventions. They're two of the really fun people to talk about, partly because they actually talk about the adventures that they're writing and things like that when you're there. So you can almost track the progress of the things that they're working on. For example, Ian, we'll talk first a little bit about cartography and your negligence in cartography, because you were walking, you were sitting in the bar with coffee cups and things with the map right in front of you, being hand drawn, completely unsavable if something spills on it. You're sitting there, working away at the thing, with steak next to you.
Well, that's is that negligent? I was I was trying to get some stuff done. It was.
It's more like potential seppuku was kind of the way I viewed it.
I like to think of it as, if I'm bored with what's going on, then I can just draw on the map. So we're working on, and not that I'm like jinxing you again, but here's one of our stretch goal maps that I'm working on, and I'm once again living dangerously with some coffee. I almost got some on it coming up here. So.
Yeah, see, there you go. And I've got mine. I've got mine too. But the map that I've got in front of me that I'm working on is a computer printed version of a PDF, so I can do pretty much anything to it and just recover it.
Just throw it out.
But one of the things to point out there. Okay, so you guys are you're working on a Kickstarter. It's Creeping Cold, and we have a link to that down in the description of the video that you'll see down there. And unlike most times, I actually remembered to put the links in there before the live video, which I usually forget. And you can't edit it once you're in the middle of the live video. So if there's anybody watching that wants to go ahead and pledge to Creeping Cold as you're hearing about it, you'll actually be able to find the link rather than have people saying it's Creeping Cold at HGQ7513. So and because of course I don't think you can rewind. I guess you can rewind a live video. But okay, so for Creeping Cold, what I'd like to point out after that long introduction is that the maps are hand drawn. What do you think is the value of the hand-drawn map?
Well, so I mean, there's definitely a difference between those older modules that like I grew up with the blue printed maps, so you couldn't photocopy them. That like I have a lot of nostalgia for those maps, and I actually think the hand-drawn maps like that with a touch more detail are making a return. I mean, you see it even with some of Dyson's stuff in some of the newest Wizards of the Coast releases. That I almost, not that the time of those fancy Photoshop 70 layer maps is gone, but I think that people are like, well, even not even that fancy, like more fancy than that. You look at some.
Yeah, no, this is pretty gray hockey.
And they're like, and I mean, I love the hand drawn maps. There's something enjoyable about them. There's like they just feel real, and frankly, like. I know what I do when I run a module. If I've got a PDF, is I'm going to print the map, and I want to give you the chance to print it so you can use it with your players without killing your printer.
Yeah, it's you are out of cyan ink halfway through the thing.
Half of it is faded.
Yeah, Yeah, that's right. You get one. It's got a lion down the middle of it that's really, really pale. Yeah. Just like in medieval mapping. I think your coffee stains on it would probably be more authentic too.
Yeah, that's
Now,
illumination.
right, exactly. So and then also from the other half of Silver Bulette, we've got Rocky. Rocky has actually been on the show for a conversation that we had about mega dungeons. Now, this module obviously is, given that it's a module, it's not going to be a mega dungeon. What are the differences in terms of writing a mega dungeon for your own use and writing a module? It's not the first time you've done it, obviously, but it's the first time we've talked about it. What are you, how, to sort of let people know about that?
Well, mega dungeons by definition are open-ended. There's always something else for the players to do. In a module like this, you've got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And just even looking at it from those 2 points of view, they're very different to write for. You've got to have, particular encounters that happen at a particular time. With this module, we're using a timeline. So, at 2:00 on Friday afternoon or whatever, something's going to happen. Where in a mega dungeon, you don't usually get that specific with the timeline. So,
I think timeline adventures are really cool. They're also fairly hard to write. I mean, I think that's harder than one that's a pure location based. I mean, did you find? I mean, how a lot of work goes into that?
Yeah, absolutely, a lot of work goes into it. A lot of it is NPC driven, so the timeline can get a little changed if you need to. But yeah, it was, figuring out when thing A happens that leads to problem B, and making sure that the characters are in the right place. That's one of the big issues of making a timeline adventure.
And this really is a murder mystery too. So like the timeline happens no matter what the players do. Well, I mean, obviously they can, if they figure things out early, they can end it. But like it moves despite what the players are doing. Like stuff is going to keep happening.
And I'd like to point out in our playtest, nobody has figured out who the bad guy is yet. Just for the record.
Let me step into something that Ian. Let me step into something that Ian definitely said, and that you implied, Rocky. One of the objections that a lot of people have to timeline adventures, which I think is because most of them have been written clunkily. There was one written by Thieves Guild a long time ago where you're robbing the Duke or something like that, and so they had the timeline in that one. So it's certainly something that's been around for a very long time. But one of the objections that a lot of people who are looking at old school play have about timeline adventures is precisely what it is that you just said, that the players can't change it. Is that because the NPCs are so because they're elsewhere? Or I mean, what is it? How is it that it's not a railroad when you have a timeline?
So I mean, it is a sandbox adventure. We've just tightened the sandbox up, so it's free to explore within this caravanserai complex that you're trapped in due to the hazardous weather. And things are going to happen because of outside forces, because of the weather. You're stuck there.
Okay, so weather is one of them. Okay.
And then there's there may be some monsters happening by occasionally, and that's going to happen. Where the players are doesn't affect that, other than how they're going to get there, what they're going to do, how they're going to react. But it really is, kind of like the Clue movie. The like Tim Curry's like, oh no, another body's been found. It doesn't matter what's going on. It's going to just kind of propel forward unless that murderer is captured right away.
Rocky, other thoughts on that? Why is it not a railroad?
He covered it pretty well. We've got over a dozen rooms to explore in the caravanserai. I can never say that word right. I've typed it out 1,000 times, still can't pronounce it.
Excellent choice for an adventure location, one you can't pronounce. That's
yep,
good.
Exactly.
That was my pick.
But there's plenty to explore in there, and after a few days, there's a point where they can go off and get to a second location. I think that pretty much covers it, right?
Okay. So, all right. So that covers the issue of the question that some people may have about it, because I mean, stepping back to 2006, 2007, when the old school, the OSR was basically one forum, two forums, and a very small number of people. And with a small number of people, it had a real risk of becoming dogmatic, which interestingly, it sort of did in cycles. And one of the really dogmatic ideas that was around at that point in the OSR was that it had to be location based. That anything that was event driven on the outside was not old school, and I disagree with that. Like I said, there's Thieves Guild Adventure. Somewhere in one of the very early Dragon magazines, there is something that happens. I think it's a caravan based adventure. You're traveling, but it was the idea that if your caravan is traveling at a particular speed and you don't stop it, which they had no reason to, then they were simply the encounters were pre-programmed. This is what you're going to hit, after a certain time. And so that's why I raised that objection. It may be that I'm behind the times in terms of OSR thinking, but that was definitely one of the dogmas that was around early on. So,
and I think like the job of a good writer is, I mean, all adventures are kind of rails, and the trick is making it seem like the ride is bigger than it actually is. And I think we did a good job of that with all the NPCs, with the locations. There's a lot going on. So I don't think they get time enough to figure out that they're, moving along without even realizing it.
Right, and I get, but I think what you're really saying is that there's a sort of an external timeline and then an internal sandbox. Is that accurate?
Yep.
Okay. Now, so let's, like I said, most Kickstarters, on none of the Kickstarters that I do on the show do I take any money. I do want to push this one though more than I do in the sort of general thing, because I think this is something, and I've taken a look at some of the advanced stuff on it, and I think this is one where I can say it's worth definitely getting. Most of the people in the chat room already know you guys, and so I think that I'm not sure how many additional sales we're going to get, but it is something where I would recommend anybody who's watching the video go and pledge to this Kickstarter, because what you're going to get is something that is, I was surprised to hear that it was event driven, but what you're going to get is something that's very, very well crafted. If you're interested in in what's meant by a forward-looking OSR, it's the stuff that these guys are doing, and so you can sort of look at, it's probably, it's obviously it's not as cutting edge as the folks in the art house are doing, but it's I think really exemplifies the sort of creative stuff that can be done in a nostalgic setting and a nostalgic presentation. So give us. So, all right. So all y'all in the chat room, go buy it. Keep your microphone on. Keep your microphone on, because I want to ask the question of, give me the initial setting that people are going to see when the players start the module. What's happening at the outset?
I mean, they're traveling on a road, so that's the benefit of this too. Is for any DM, like as long as your players are outdoor and traveling, you can drop this on them, and basically a flash blizzard comes along out of nowhere, and the players are moving towards the only nearest shelter that they know of, and they bump into a family they can either assist or leave in the dirt as they get to shelter.
Okay, and so that's the sort of initial premise.
Yeah, and we've really we've set up some cold rules for both, and obviously they're optional, but for both 5th edition and Swords and Wizardry, and like the storm is deadly. Like unless you're prepared for it and you're ready to be out there, like you're outdoors in a crazy blizzard that's coming along, and like it could kill you.
Yeah, and and it's interesting. One of the areas where there is a dovetail between the 5th edition rules and the Swords and Wizardry rules, is that exposure to the elements can be quite deadly in 5th edition. It's one of the areas where people can die, whereas in combat that's pretty hard. I mean, you've got to be attacking yourself basically to die in 5th edition, but in combat. But
and we added a little bit more to it. We looked at frostbite and hypothermia and added those as not exactly conditions, but they're part of the optional cold rules that we have for 5th edition. So it makes that we wanted that storm to feel and be deadly, and those rules make that happen.
And it's great too. It's us, so we old schooled it. So there's some nice random roll charts to like look at what
everybody likes random roll charts,
right? It's a look at what limb is all blackened with frostbite. Like, is it that tiefling, all these new races horn, or like the dragonborn's little tail or something? Like, there's a chart that lets you roll to see where the frostbite's occurring.
So it could be a flow chart. It could be like, have you got a tail? Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yeah, decision tree for.
Hey to Jim Ingram. I don't think I've seen your name before on the show in the chat room. So either welcome to the show or welcome to the world of people talking on the chat room. Douglas Zielsdorf says adventure hook or else. They said the adventure hook is you're traveling. That's an adventure hook, And we also I have to pose to you guys an algebra question. And the algebra question is this from VA. If one caravan leaves Greyhawk at 8 miles per day and another leaves Quasqueton at 10 miles per day, when do the two of them arrive at Divers?
Neither one of them arrive because they've ran across a random encounter on the way.
Okay, that's a good answer. Good answer. They get caught in a giant storm in a caravanserai.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the one of the questions or rather everyone who runs a Kickstarter has some sort of tempest in a teapot. One of your tempests in the teapot was that you did a graphic where the owl was coming down to grab a mouse. Owl was labeled Creeping Cold, and the mouse was labeled Swords and Wizardry. And some people took offense more to the idea that an adventure that's designed in one system that it suffers from translation into another system. And I have an opinion on that. Let me hear y'all's opinion about that though first.
Oh, I think it's true. If you're just doing a straight conversion, it suffers. It's not what it's meant to be. We're doing almost a pretty solid rewrite from original outline, Rocky's Swords and Wizardry playtest notes, and so it's a second module essentially work-wise.
Yeah, no, they are. I mean, and I think I agree with you. That really is what you've got to do to a degree. I think that 5th edition is certainly there are degrees. I mean, 5th edition is certainly more easily converted than say Pathfinder into a more open system. But you still all that you really need to do with 5th edition is to describe the details that are going to give people the data that they need to make their decisions. Whereas in 5th edition, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of details that are skated over, just resolved for convenience with die rolls. I mean, from 5th edition standpoint, it's for convenience.
Well, it's a dream writing the Swords and Wizardry, though I do have to say, like I don't have to stop and try to force what's happening into a mechanical system. I can write prose about, like, if the players look in the corner of it's just all prose, like about what people are doing, and how clever they are and how thorough they are, rather than having to try to shoehorn a mechanic into it.
I got another question about module development, because I mean, a lot in virtually all cases, and I can think of maybe a couple of exceptions, but in most cases you've got a person writing a module and they're writing it alone, and you guys don't do that. There's a lot more back and forth between the two of you guys. So just for a snapshot in time, when we were all at GaryCon, what were the parts of the module that you guys were talking about, although do it without spoilers?
I think I'm trying to think back. It's been a blur.
Yeah, it really has.
The reason I ask about that is because it was a time when you guys were physically in the same location, because you don't live in the same area.
Let's back up another step. This
Okay.
started at TotalCon. When I went to TotalCon for the first time this year, Ian and I sat down and decided that we wanted to do this module, and there were nights where we were just sitting in the hotel, and we were in his hotel room, just sitting there typing away on the computers, going, "All right, so what do you think this NPC should look like?" And there was a lot of bounce back and forth to begin with the NPCs, and then as we moved forward on the timeline, I know that the ending was one thing that we had a huge discussion about. We, you know what I'm talking about, Ian. I don't want to give it away, but there's a decision tree at the end of the adventure that could be potentially disastrous or very redeeming for a party.
Does it have to do with whether you have a tail?
It does not.
It doesn't.
Damn, that's a shame.
Tail not required.
I'm gonna keep looking for that, throughout the whole thing.
But we're probably funny as we write too, because so even looking at the NPCs for us, we wrote different NPCs, and it's fun because we end up creating relationships between them that, like, oh yeah, you did that well, and like it makes them a little fuller. But we'll sit in Microsoft Word, both logged in at the same time, typing on the same document. So like I'm watching his stuff appear and he's watching my stuff appear, and you're like, wait a minute, like, it's kind of exciting.
Okay, so for an event-driven adventure, I don't think I've ever written one, because I'm one of those people who usually start with a map, and then once I've got a little bit of the map, I write a little bit of the text, and it goes back and forth. I don't think I've ever written an event-based adventure other than way long ago, which was totally a railroad. But where did you start on that? Did you start with the beginning? Did you start with the end? Did you start with with both at once, and then the question of what's in the middle? Or did you start with, here would be a great thing to have happen, and then work outward toward the ending and the beginning? How do you write an event-based adventure?
So, we start with an outline. And it was basically like 11 o'clock at TotalCon, and I said, Rocky, I have this idea. And he goes, all right, it needs this and this and this. And from there, we just started generating an outline and figuring out, like, we knew what we wanted at the end and how we wanted it to start. And we just sort of bridged in the middle and just fleshed it out.
And quite often we would find that we needed to add this encounter to get from this point to that point. We'd have to add another encounter in there.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, let me ask finish that off, because I've had another question occur to me that is so away from the topic that we're doing. So fill in any ending about the procedure on that, and we'll probably go back to it.
So, well, my only thing was, I was just going to say that there is, like, random encounters are a pretty good one about this too. So, like, multiple playings, you'll bump into multiple different encounters, unless you want to torture your players with every single one of them. So, I'm not saying it's happened to a playtest group, but it's happened to a playtest group.
How did that work in the playtest group?
It was terrible. They almost died, like, multiple times. Like, it took them, a day and a half to get where it took everybody else 3 hours to get. So,
what level is the adventure for? So
it's scalable. So you can take 1st through 5th level players for 5th edition, and then for Swords and Wizardry, it's deadly. So you really need, like, that 3 to 5 level, unless you don't mind some people dying. Which, you're playing Swords and Wizardry, you probably shouldn't.
My party almost TPK'd, so but you want them about 3rd level, and I think
they were first.
Yeah, they were first. I think at 3rd level you might still have a couple of characters die.
This is certainly, you want to run something where there's the potential, at least, to have some characters die, depending on how well they do.
Yeah, at 3rd level, I think that there would still be 1 or 2 character deaths.
Yeah, some of the monsters are terrifying, just because they might seem like something but it's not.
So are there new monsters in the back?
Yeah, we did our own fancy cold troll, which I loved, and that was a big fight for us too, because Rocky and Jake, who but another friend of ours, are like, "You're gonna murder the whole 5th edition party with them," and I'm like, "No, it works. Trust me."
Didn't Ala say that too?
Yeah, and it does. It works because I only knew because I tried it a bunch of times. But it's a fight. Like it's like you're gonna be worried for your life, which you should be in a big fight like that. So there, but yeah, we have 3 new monsters in there that are pretty sweet, if we say so. A couple new magic items, a couple new spells that are fun.
Yeah, the spells are a lot of fun. They're not something that you think about. They're the type of spell that you don't need until you need them. You won't even think about it until you need it. But once you realize you need it, you're glad you have it.
Okay, that's always
and they're the kind of spells that like I would make as a wizard too. So like one of them affects traction and in the cold, which if you're a wizard, you'd be like, I'm not gonna salt the area outside. I could make a spell to do this.
So it's basically ways to remain sitting in your armchair and
with a cup of coffee, like let me take care of.
I got this. Okay, so one of the questions also that I had, and you'll see why this is just way off topic, but I talked to a lot of people about TotalCon, and everyone really, really liked it. I mean, is this an up and coming convention that people are going to be going to a lot?
It's only been around for almost 40 years, so it's coming into its own.
But it's but it's not. But it's not huge. I mean, it's a relatively small con, right?
Yeah, and it's New England. There's not a lot of conventions in New England area, so it's one that's just been pretty steady on there, and has a great following. It's well run.
It is well run. This being my first year, it reminded me a lot of GaryCon 3 or 4 years ago. When they were right around 1,000 people, there was plenty of room to move around. It was the hotel layout is a little bit wonky. You've got kind of 2 wings with different, like one side's the board game side and one side's the RPG side. But once you get the layout of the hotel, it was a really fun convention. It was laid back. You're not elbow to elbow with people. Nobody was in a bad mood. You're not running into those people that are like, I'm here to game and I want to do this and you're in my way of doing this. None of that. It was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it gets some. I mean, they don't have a lot of celebrities there, like insider people that go. So I think they're happy to have people too. And it's, as conventions go, they're like Angelo Parento and them. They take care of people. They know what they're doing.
Excellent. Okay. Just because I heard, universally good things about it as a convention, so I got curious about it.
Location is great too. It's by a bunch of restaurants and like.
It's in freaking Massachusetts in the middle of winter. I would have said the location was probably, that was not ideal.
That's early spring here. Okay.
Yeah, right.
I went to college in Massachusetts. I actually know that you're lying.
That's why. Well, I'm not lying. We just have different ideas about what nice weather is, I think. I'm farther north of there, so.
Okay, so back off of TotalCon and onto Creeping Cold, and I want to talk again about there are a lot of people who are coming to the point where they've got things and they want to run Kickstarters, and so talk a little bit about how did the Kickstarter experience go, like on day one, for example?
We weren't even sure we wanted to do a Kickstarter yet. We didn't know if we were where we wanted to be technically to actually put something out and mass produce it. We've done a couple of. We did Silvery Moon Tavern was a 50 print run book, and Undying Orbs Omnibus was a 100 print run book. But this is a big step, and we rallied the troops, made sure all of our friends knew that we were doing a Kickstarter, and we were floored with the response that we got day one. We were funded in like an hour and 4 minutes. So it was an amazing first couple of days on the Kickstarter. Now we're pushing through and doing some relayout, and Ian's working on the rewrite for Swords and Wizardry. He's working on the maps. We've got the stretch goals are pushing us more and more work, but it's been a lot of fun.
And and all Kickstarters, by the way, for anybody who's thinking about it, hit an incredibly slow period right in the middle. Most of the pledges on a Kickstarter are going to start at the beginning and then end right when people realize that it's about to finish out.
And luckily, like, we really haven't had much of that. We've been pretty steadily getting backers the whole way through, which is sort of amazing to us.
Well,
and thank everybody for it. Thank every one of those backers. We do appreciate it.
In fact, we have this great quote from the chat room. Got to run. Planning on backing. Looks cool. So, maybe people leaving one screen and going and backing the Kickstarter.
At this point too, like back at the PDF level, you get a 5e adventure, you get a Swords of Wizardry adventure. It's not just one with the stats converted, it's 2 adventures at this point with like some subtle differences and stuff. But it's a good deal.
Okay, so free-form discussion about it then. I've asked some questions. What are the questions and the answers to them that are, unique or interesting to Creeping Cold that I forgot to ask?
We have to do your job too now? What the heck?
Yeah, you absolutely do.
Well, I think the NPCs we've like really done quite well with, and like fleshed them out. Like they're really at reading the NPCs. We have some quick charts, so when you're running the game, you can have one piece of paper in front of you and be running these NPCs that will seem like different people and have different mannerisms because it's all right there in front of you. And that extends too as you explore the location. Like you can really see the personality in each of the individual rooms as well. So it's not just like Ye Olde Tavern, every room has a bed and a dresser. Like all the rooms are different. There's different stuff going on. That it's clearly part of whoever is in that room and lives there.
And dovetailing off of that, we made the NPC chart, which is a quick reference. It gives you a general description, why they're at the place that I can't pronounce, and their
Caravanserai.
That place, and their basic personality descriptions. We did everything we could to make, we're talking about around a dozen NPCs. That's a lot for a GM to manage.
It is.
So
yeah.
We're doing everything we can to make them manageable. Our next stretch goal is a PDF of NPC cards.
Physical cards.
It's PDF, so you can print them out on a 3x5 index card or whatever.
That's getting into the risk area on a Kickstarter.
So it's one sheet and both sides. So like one side will have like all of the quick info bullet points for like personality, etc. The other side will have a physical picture of the NPC, so you can hold it up to your players and let them see who they're talking to, kind of thing.
That it is always one of the big questions when you're writing a module about how to structure the thing, because there are different visual ways to allow people to refer quickly, at game speed to the different places that they need. I mean, for example, one real benefit of the small font size in the really old TSR adventures, that small font size allowed you to actually see several rooms at one time.
Yep.
So, so with NPC cards, I mean, that sounds like one really good way of streamlining NPCs is to put them onto, actual cards or a sheet of cards. That's a cool idea.
And we're also going to print that chart. We're doing the old school style cover too, where it's not going to be stapled to the book. And that NPC chart that's in the book will also be on the inside cover. So that makes it, the GM doesn't have to flip back and forth 3 times to find that chart again.
Because one of the really useful pieces of real estate in a book is the last couple of pages, because it's always easy to flip to the back page. You're not trying to aim at 3/4,
Yeah.
So
the first couple and the last couple of pages are always easiest to find, but we're going to try and get as much of that information on the interior of the cover as possible, so you can use it just like a GM screen.
And we're like,
it's a separate cover.
Yeah, it's going to be like the old school novels.
Okay, that's cool. You're actually
we're like nostalgically in love with the the old school module style, and that's something that's I don't know if it's a trait of ours, but like from everything we've done has always had some useful thing on the inside cover for the DMs, because that was half the fun when you were getting it, was to be able to see what was going on. And
It
and
was,
that,
but that's a really expensive way of producing. I mean, most people who mass produce things, partly it's because you generally put them together, but you know, that's really gone. That's something that hasn't gone out of style in terms of what people want, but it's gone out of style in terms of what publishers produce. So that's impressive, because it's a
Well,
really good tool.
I'm having it
And we-
printed locally, so it's something that's available to me at low cost. I'm gonna have.
and we have a generous helping of child labor too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the kids, of course, you know, they want to help out in the project any way they can, and having them insert the booklets into the module covers is a great thing for the, you know, the 5, 6, and 8-year-old to help with to make this project go.
How are you then going to sell it on call it Drive Through RPG or any place with that? Are you doing a different PDF for the cover, or how are you?
Yeah, the cover will be just a second PDF, and it'll just be kind of I don't remember what they call it, but when you buy either the other two, the Undying Orbs or the Silvery Moon Tavern, both of them are the same way. You just download 2 separate files.
Okay. So still on the question of organization, apparently a great debate has resurrected itself from the dead, and you're both laughing. So you know I'm giving you plenty of time to think about the answer, because you already know what the question is going to be. But the issue has re-risen of, does it use boxed text or does it not?
All right,
it does.
So, yeah,
Go ahead, Ian.
And the Swords and Wizardry one has box text and bullet points. You're welcome, Chuck. Right. And I think, like, here's my thing with box text is box text is the author's voice running this module for you. So like that's like Matt writes box text, like you're reading it. That's Matt's
you
voice.
son of a bitch! Bringing me into it.
Yeah, I know. I've seen your box text. I've read it. But I mean, like, it really is a guideline. Like, you should make that your own. And I think most DMs do. We're not asking you to read box text like an automaton. You know, we want you to paraphrase, put your own voice in it, and pull out the information. But that's what you'd get if Rocky or I were running it for you.
Mm-hmm. And in the hypothermia and frostbite rules, I actually have box text in there that I don't expect anybody to read, but it gives the DM a little bit of a better idea of how to describe what is happening to the characters. And it's, you know, mild hypothermia or whatever, and there's just a descriptive white box description in there that isn't expected to be read to the players, but
so in a way you're using it as call out text, where it's your, you know, voice of, you know, here's some stuff, you know, from the author. Is that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'd say that's accurate. And then we do the bullet pointed lists for information that's important enough to be pulled out for the eye. And I think that's important.
I think that's pretty close to the way I do it too. I mean, my theory on box text is that it is very useful. You know, the example that I use for the non-box text is G1, Steadying of the Hill Giant Chief. It's just the thing that's in my head when I'm thinking about that. And then the box text allows you to isolate, here are the visual elements, is the way that I organize it. And then usually bullet points are more for areas where you need to know that there is a list of something that you're seeing. Yeah. I usually use it for treasure rather than important points about the room. But it's the same basic theory that your box text is going to be short and it's limited to a particular kind of information to call out. I got another question. Speaking of Steadying the Hill Giant Chief. One of the things that you said about the NPCs reminded me about one of the old modules. And so I want to see whether you were in line with that as being one of the backgrounds or whether you weren't. Which one of the, if you were to pick old TSR modules, which is this one the most like? Because their style
I don't know.
changed. I mean, there's a lot of style changes over the course of TSR's history, and there are a lot of interesting modules. Which one do you think this most resembles in terms of the style, in terms of the scenario or the style of play?
I see. I don't know, Rocky. What do you think? Because I can't think of one that.
I immediately think of Castle Amber.
Oh, okay. I see that. I see that.
That's interesting. The one that your description made me think of was Village of Hamlet. I mean, how close is it to the sort of Village of Hamlet atmosphere?
It's pretty close to that too. It's a little, there's only the 3 buildings in the main area, so it's a lot more compacted. But yeah, the exploration is different but similar. I can definitely see the correlation between the two.
I think the Village of Hamlet was too large for what it was doing, but in terms of a style, it was a lot of fun. Sorry, Ian, I stepped on what you were saying.
And one of our friends who had done some editing and looked at it for us said it was like the Hateful Eight meets The Thing. Those 2 movies melded together, which we see like it is. It's definitely
the Hateful Eight meets The Thing. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess that was that's our elevator pitch to the movie producers when it gets made into a full-length film.
It's very important to be prepared for that because of how.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
You never know when it's going to happen.
We got a question going back to the playtesting that I think is a good one for people to ask, which is that in a murder mystery, there are a lot of ways that players can accidentally just completely circumvent what's going on, with a zone of truth spell or something similar like that. Did you run into that kind of thing in the playtesting and have to fix what was in there?
So like Rocky said, so far in the playtesting that like people haven't been able to
Nobody's been close.
Like who it is, like what's going on. Like they know something's going on, and they always have a suspect, but it has not been the right suspect thus far.
That's great.
So and they've done some nutty stuff, like some of the stakeouts and stuff that people have run at night to try to figure out what stuff is going on. Have been pretty great, and the accusations flying have been just wonderful. Like it's, but we haven't, like no one's had the wherewithal to. Like, we've had some. See, 5th edition makes it tough too, because like players are often like, "Well, can I roll my insight and figure out what they're thinking?" And you're like, "All right," but there's some layers to this mystery, so that it's harder to figure out than you'd think it would be.
Insight's one of the really difficult things with 5th edition. I mean, how do you provide, because DMs, I can see, for example, a beginning 5th edition DM, which I basically am, largely because I just haven't sat down and read the rules through. So I mean, it's the DMing I've done in 5th edition is mostly seat of the pants. Do you give a beginning 5th edition DM any hints about how to handle some of the things that are in there?
Yeah, there's a lot of extraneous information that's and a lot of this came about because we play tested so much. Was like, all right, well, the players constantly want to eavesdrop on NPCs that are like off doing other things. How do we handle that, and what do we want to let them know? And how do you figure out if they've caught any of that information? So that's some stuff we had to adjust for and had to tweak and streamline as we play tested more and more. But we did some pretty rigorous play testing with this one, which is always helpful in an adventure, especially like this.
Yeah, because in 5th edition, yeah, I can see why you would have to rewrite this, because, for example, in 5th edition, everybody can try and be stealthy, whereas in Swords and Wizardry or one of the older systems, it's just more situational. It's like, if you're in plate mail, stealthy, no way. But so in 5th edition, there's the capability for everybody to be. So I mean, do you run into a situation of lots and lots of I'm trying to sneak around and then comparing the perception checks? I mean, what does it look like when?
Yeah, and we had to add like even stuff like, all right, how hard is it to break into everybody's rooms like that? Because that like there are some parties that were like, all right, yeah, everybody's down here. I'm just gonna go take a nap, and have just like rifled through people's rooms.
To take a nap was probably the most common thing I heard in the most recent playtest.
Hey,
a lot of napping.
You got a system and it works, I guess. Did you run into one of the things I really enjoy, which is really a judgment call in terms of how long to let it go on, is when they make a plan. And they'll sit down and they'll plan forever. How do you handle the potential risk of having the planning of something take up the entire game system, and how long do you let it last?
Well, I mean, that's the beauty of this one, is like you can let them plan and just have the evening move along, and add some pressure to them. But the plans are awesome, especially what we've encountered with this module. Like the plans are amazing.
That's
like,
awesome.
They are too.
I mean, that alone makes me, want to run the module, because one of the joys of being a DM is seeing just what kind of Rube Goldberg device, house of cards, terrible idea piled on terrible idea your players can manage to concoct and think that it's the most sensible way to approach a situation.
Well, and they're trying to figure out how long to stay outside and how to take care of themselves. Like, I think Rocky's going to share this one. Go ahead, man.
Well, I was just going to say one of the plans that the Swords and Wizardry group had with me, and this isn't giving too much away, they literally went around the entire place and dumped buckets of water on the windows and doors to close everything up.
Let it freeze.
Oh, that's great. Okay, cool.
Yeah, ice over the windows and doors and stuff. Nothing in or out.
Yep.
Share some others if you could call them up from memory.
I had one where they had set up this shift system to sleep outdoors in a barn in the hay. They were trying to hide. And they had this ridiculous plan of, one of them was ferrying hot water from the inside to the outside in hot water bottles to attempt to alleviate the cold effects, which was just like, like you don't think, like, well, he's going to sneak it, because they were using 5th edition rules. So it's, there's like a fighter in plate mail sneaking a dozen hot water bottles in the barn in the middle of the night. You're like, what?
Like I said, it is the player planning is the greatest joy, and it's entirely because the view from the far side of the DM screen, it's a lot harder to figure things out than you get stuff that you as the DM think is going to be completely obvious, and from the player side it's not. But the ways of solving things are just they're a joy to watch. That another thing that sells this module right here is that it's good at evoking crazy plans. Oh yeah, there's definitely some. Yeah, but I mean, a puzzle's always easy if you know the answer. Yeah. So I think and that was one reason we had to play test this too, because we didn't want to just smoke everybody. We still wanted some surprise, some excitement, and some success too. I got one question though about the playtesting and talking about the level of difficulty of things from the player side. I mean, you got to ask, if no one's ever figured out who it was, doesn't that mean it's too hard?
No, because the story progresses.
Yes.
The story progresses, and the villain
no matter what
itself at some point.
Okay.
You figure out what's going on by the end, whether or not. I mean, you can get ahead of it. But I mean, it's going to reveal, and I mean, for us too, that's some of the best runs of this adventure, is seeing the reveal. And it's just one of the reveals with mine. Like the whole table was just quiet for 3 minutes, just like staring, like no one said anything.
Yep,
And
that's how
shocking.
most of the reveals have been. Is just everybody's like, "Wait, what? That's
They're
awesome!"
Like, no, but it can't be.
Oh, that's great. I mean, like I said, these guys are really good at what they do, and again, I think that comparing it to the general dogma that was around in 2007, that a location-based adventure is the way that you've got to do it. I think, y'all are very much at the, it's not exactly a cutting edge, but it's carving out new ideas and that can be approached using older rule systems and then working it with 5th edition too. So kudos for that.
Well, and everybody who's getting the 5e PDF is going to see the Swords and Wizardry one too that they're going to have. And I think that it's a pretty stark difference between that mechanics-based system and a more narrative-based system that hopefully entices some people to give that a shot, where it's not your character's intelligence that's making the decisions, it's how clever you and your friends are when you're facing that challenge.
Do you have any sense, and I'm not sure I would expect you to, but do you have any sense of how many pure 5th edition players you are bringing in from the mainstream as opposed to the old school players, or is that just not visible yet? You definitely had the person who was upset about the fact that the Swords and Wizardry was the second thing, but so there's one on the pure old school side, but how are you getting any sense of that, or is it not?
I'm thinking, I'm trying to look at our statistics. I know we probably have about a third that we can tell that are just 5e players. I think the 5e market is tougher for people to get recognized into, because neither of us is a celebrity, and we don't have a huge budget podcast or anything like that. So that's been a little harder to get the word out, I think. And we keep doing that and seeing how it goes, and it's a grind, but it's a good adventure. People will love it. We've had a blast with it so far.
I also think the 5th edition market is, in one sense, it's very centralized, because the large players in that are basically just Wizards of the Coast, Frog God Games. Who else am I forgetting? There's somebody else that does. Wolfgang Bauer's company is
Kobold Press.
Kobold Press, and so you've really got that sort of pyramid up at the top, and then you've got a huge number of people who are selling stuff through the DMs Guild, but that's so decentralized, and so many people that I haven't really spotted anybody really rising up to large scale company recognition in that one. So you're probably caught in that DMs Guild zone.
Yeah, and I think we're doing all right with sharing it, and we've done a lot of talking about it. We've done a bunch of podcasts, but and DMs Guild has some great authors too, like David Floor's done some great Bard subtypes, and so there's a lot of people who have experience with old school stuff that are playing with 5e and doing some stuff with 5e that hopefully will share some of the other older systems with people.
Yeah. All right. I think that certainly establishes the information I can think of that people are going to want to know about the Kickstarter, and I don't want to start at the 53-minute mark talking about y'all's approaches to D&D and top 5 DM tips and stuff like that people are also interested in the show. So I think I want to bring you guys back separately for the top 5 DM tips.
Okay.
To a later one. So let's go ahead and wrap it up. It's only about 7 minutes early. Some of the shows are a little bit quicker, but so throw in. So what have we forgotten, Ian, if anything?
What have we forgotten? I don't know, but back to Kickstarter, it's up there. It's just stretch goal heaven at this point. There's upcoming those NPC cards, which we really they're almost done being completed. We want people to have them. We've got 2 additional hand-drawn maps that'll kick up after that, $500 after that. But we are more than pleased. We're thankful to everybody who's jumped in and taken a look at this, and we hope that everybody enjoys it.
Rocky, what did we forget?
I think that we've covered about everything. We end Tuesday, April 30th at 10:30 Eastern time, I think is the date that the Kickstarter ends. Just probably should throw that out there. Doug, if you really want your pledge to be Swords and Wizardry, I'm sure that Ian and I can work that out. I saw your question earlier in the chat. So otherwise,
Yes, Doug.
I think that's it.
Doug's choice.
Did Doug refuse to buy it if he got a copy of 5th edition free?
No, he grabbed one of our. So a couple of our pledges are that Rocky and I run the game for you at some of the conventions we go to.
Okay.
So there's Total Con, Gamehole Con, and Gary Con, and Doug. Was it? Are those the three?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Yeah.
We didn't do North Texas just because it was so close.
But yeah, Doug can choose his edition. He wanted one of those games so he could get a hold of a game for him and his buddies in it. And we definitely will. It'll be a blast.
Awesome. All right, we're going to go ahead and close it off here. It's only about 5 minutes earlier than we usually run on the interviews. So say goodbye to everybody, Rocky and Ian.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Have a good night.
Yeah, and I will say to everybody, no matter what kind of Dungeons and Dragons it is that you play, imagine the hell out of it.